What's going on, everyone? Ian Scotto here, Battle Line Podcast. You know what it is, at Ian Scotto on Twitter. And for those of you watching on YouTube, you may be like, wow, this actually looks really high definition. This doesn't look like the Zoom videos. So, yeah, the reason for that is when I'm just shooting myself, it's very easy to shoot this. Like, Chris and I actually both have high resolution cameras and great microphones. I'm not using my Rode microphone just because for some reason when I do this, when I record to the computer, I can't use the Rode. It only records in one channel, or I can't use that Rode. I forgot they're both made by Rode. So I have to use the USB microphone for any of you interested in technical stuff. But the video quality, as you can see, is way higher. Microphone quality is going to be better. Zoom reduces everything. So the reason for that, though, is that, there are programs like Riverside and Squadcast where you could record in high resolution. And also the audio is better as well for those of you just listening. Uh, the thing is, we've used Squadcast before, and we've had issues now and again. Riverside, you have to adjust the levels. It's so much going on, and if you look at the last episode, for example, that we did with Frank Rippey, like his connection was cutting in and out a little bit, right? Because it just wasn't the best connection. Zoom will make that a minor hiccup, and if you record more in high resolution, it would most likely be, from my experience, just a giant pain. He would probably drop in, drop out. So, long story short, if I'm just shooting myself for parts of the video, I'm going to try to do this more often because it just looks way nicer. And if you're not on YouTube, sign over to YouTube and you can see what the hell I'm talking about at Battleline Podcast on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify has reviews now, please leave us a review. It really helps us to get more listeners. You guys are loyal as fuck. So yeah, we could always use your help. Everything we do is word of mouth, and we're trying to grow this, getting great guests on, like of course Max Mullen. Now, I got to talk about this. If you were having sleep issues like so many people do, you got to try these magnesium sleep supplements that Ned has put out. The latest being their super blend, their mellow latte. I mean, this thing is awesome. It's kind of mind boggling to me when I hear that people have sleep issues still because, between CBD and magnesium and all this other great stuff that Ned is putting out, I promise you it'll work for you. And when you do the shut eye chai, by the way, they give you this cool little book, a very mellow bedtime story. It is like Rhett and Adrian animated in here, but it's more than just like a silly little thing they throw in there because it actually has some important tips. How it's like, if you're having trouble sleeping, shut off your phone. You don't need those. What is it called? The blue. I'm gonna get the terminology wrong. I'm just going off the top of the head here. But anyway, like that blue screen stuff that people use glasses to. Uh, they sell them online, right? So that you don't have that in your eyes before you're going to sleep. Because all of it, if you're on your phone constantly before you go to sleep, stuff like that, it's not good. And I will tell you, this stuff tastes amazing. It's just like a great nighttime ritual. And yeah, I love it. It tastes like a latte from Starbucks, but more like cinnamony. And it's just you're gonna love it. You guys got to try it. And then it also has that electric mixer that you could throw in there to use to mix everything. But that thing is powerful, so use it very lightly at first. You're gonna splash hot latte all over yourself, as I have before from experience. So 70 million Americans have chronic sleep issues, and 50% of Americans deal with sleep deprivation. Just as I said, you've probably dealt with it at some point in your life, and I know how difficult that could be. That's why one of our favorite brands, Ned, is here to help you with their incredible new product, Shut Eye Chai. It's inspired by 5,000 years of ancient healing tradition, and it's Ned's biggest product launch to date. It's a mellow super blend latte for sleep that combines adaptogens, aminos, functional mushrooms, and magnesium. Seriously, the best ingredients out there, wrapped in a heavenly masala chai inspired spiced body. Think cinnamon, clove, ginger, all that good stuff. It's all natural, made exclusively from functional botanicals, fungi, herbs, plants, minerals, roots, and spices. And they share third party lab reports on all of their products. And also, this one contains no CBD, no caffeine either. So, if you're worried about that, if you're getting drug tested and you can't take CBD, you could take this. So, Ned products help me perform better when I'm doing these great interviews for Battle Line Podcast. And truly, guys, anything that we promote on this show is something that we love and we use. We're not just putting generic ads in the podcast. Like, this is stuff that if you were to go up to me personally or go up to Chris personally, we will tell you it works. We love it. For me, it has helped me just have like energy during the day. I'm not in a sleep deprived and brain fog induced coma. I'm awake, I'm alert. That's why I'm able to conduct these interviews. So discover how Shut Eye Chai can revolutionize your sleep and get 15% off with the code BattleLine. That's 15% off with the code BattleLine when you go to helloned.com/BattleLine or enter the code BattleLine at checkout. That's HELLONED.com/BattleLine to get 15% off. So now you're sleeping well, you're up in the morning, you're alert, but you got to go work out. You got to get a ton of work done, right? You need that energy. That's where our other favorite product comes in, and that's coffee from Beard Vet. I love that Excellence blend. It's a darker blend. I like a darker coffee. I mean, they have different blends on there, but yeah, that's my favorite. I mean, we've worked with other coffee companies, but Beard Vet is number one. I have to tell you, that's just truly how I feel, how Chris feels. Roasted in the heart of America, Omaha, Nebraska, traditional and unique flavors in ground, whole bean, or grunt cups, K-cups, of course, and beard kits. They also select a veterans charity every month to give back to. Sometimes that's been 14th Hour Foundation. Sean himself, the owner, is a Marine, DAV lifetime member, and an equestrian helper. His wife, Amy, is a trainer. Trust us, this stuff is awesome, man. It's my favorite coffee. I don't do pre-workout. I just drink coffee before a workout, and Beard Vet gets me through it. They also have the beard oil. Shaved off the beard for currently, but I've used it before. It's great. Great merchandise, so check them out. Use the promo code TANTO, but spell it right, TANTO, for 10% off when you go to beardvet.com. That's beardvet.com. Also, be sure to follow them on Twitter. They have a huge Twitter following, at beard_vet and at Team Beard Vet on Instagram. But go to beardvet.com. Use the promo code TANTO. You're going to get 10% off through us here at Battle Line Podcast. Now let's get over to Mad Max Mullen.
From Omaha, Nebraska to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Switch is on. Motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
You know, Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battle Line Podcast.
The Switch is on Battle Line Podcast. We had Howard Mad Max Mullen back on episode 100, which was very celebratory with Chris and myself. Chris is doing a speaking engagement, I believe, right now. His schedule is all over the place. But yeah, I got to meet you at last year's SHOT Show 2022. And sometimes you get to meet people you do these Zoom interviews with in person, and you know, they're not as cool. And like with you, you meet someone and you're like, this is the real deal, genuine guy. And you and I had a conversation for like a good 30 minutes or something on the floor of SHOT Show while people were waiting to meet you. And it was a great time meeting you last year.
Absolutely. It was good meeting you, Ian. Sorry I missed you at the SHOT Show this year, though.
Yeah, we'll get into it, man. I mean, we'll definitely get into that. There's so many great stories that I just get to hear from you and from your time as an Army Ranger and all the stuff that you've done since, your speaking engagements since. I want to get into it, but I think the first thing to start with is really unfortunate news. And I know you didn't know the guy, but I would still consider him a brother of yours, just being a fellow Army Ranger. And that's that Joe Capich. I believe he always went by Joe Cap. I got a chance to meet him
Right.
really briefly when I worked at Sirius XM. So if I get the last name wrong, I believe it was Joseph Kapicheski or Kapichewski, but Joe Cap, Army Ranger, author of Back in the Fight, unfortunately passed away. I got to meet him when I was working at Sirius XM, and he was promoting Back in the Fight. I know that Joe was the first Army Ranger to ever lose a limb in combat and then go back into combat. And I think he may have been the first military personnel to ever do that. And kind of in typical Army Ranger fashion, when you asked him about it, like he laughed about it. I was like, are you worried going back into combat? And it was like, no, because if something happens to that leg again, they could just reattach a new one. I'm not worried about this other leg. I think it'll be all right. And I mean, I don't know exactly what happened, but I hate to say it, and I don't want to speculate because I don't know the facts, but when you don't hear cause of death, and when you see people writing that I assume met him that said, oh, I wish he could have reached out, you kind of think the worst. And it's like, man, we've lost so many guys, not just in GWAT, the Global War on Terror, but like to their own hands. And I don't know if this is a case of that, but we're just losing so many guys who you served along with, and the generations after served alongside.
Yeah, absolutely. It's real sad. My prayers go out to the family. It took the Ranger community by shock, absolutely stunned. I saw the posting that morning when it posted, and I just shook my head. And the circumstances and cause of this passing wasn't announced, but you have a gut feeling after, the day go by and, you start reading some of the posts that, you just sad. We're losing so many, like you said, we're losing so many of our war fighters, and you think to yourself, what would take a person in such a dark space? You see this young man, you never know what's going on the inside. And I always tell people that a lot of our war fighters, they brought the war home. You see the smile on the face, but what's going on the inside, you never know. You just never know. And it's sad. It's sad. And so we always say, if you haven't heard from your Ranger buddy or somebody in a while, reach out. Don't hesitate. If a person's placed on your mind, reach out. Because I had a cousin. She committed suicide, and it completely stunned. And one thing about suicide is that it affects everybody. Because we have to deal with it. What if? Could I have reached out? Did I see something? What if I would have said something? So you leave yourself in the situation of what I could have done. But keep the family in prayer, and let's pray for our war fighters. And hopefully this scourge, which it's just sad. That's all I can say.
Yeah, and I hope that it's not the cause, and I don't know, and I don't think you know either 100% if it's the cause. I mean, it's sort of inferring, and if it's not, and if anyone wants to reach out, I definitely want to correct that. But as I said, you kind of just think the worst when you see that there's no cause in this young guy. And also, when you're talking about like the smiling faces, I think the last tweet that Joe Cap had was him with his young son at an Atlanta Braves game. And I believe Joe had two sons, I think, like two young sons, if I'm correct. I know he was a father, though.
Again, I never knew him personally, but I heard about him, the book that he wrote and so forth. But we have to keep the family in prayer, especially his two young sons. It's just so sad. Sad day.
Yeah,
I'm
and
lost
I
for
think
words, to tell you the truth.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
I'm lost for words.
Yeah. I mean, and I think people read these books of these guys, and we talk about it on the show, and sometimes it's like that hero worship type of thing, and you think of these guys as being invincible. And I know for many people, like reading a book about a guy who lost his leg in combat and went right back into combat, like that inspires so many people. And I think that book had such a positive impact on people, and hopefully that's how he'll be remembered, because I think the whole Army Ranger mentality of what other small group of war fighters would be willing to put their life on the line like that, like after he easily could have said, I'm done with my deployments. I lost my leg. I'm retiring. I mean, that is like the ultimate courage to go back in the fight. And that's what his book was about.
I concur and I agree with you 110%. And I'll often tell people that my service in the 7th Ranger Regiment was some of the best times of my life. And even to this day, to this very day, I would drop everything to be able to get back into the fight with the 7th Ranger Regiment. It just become a part of you. The camaraderie, the friends that you meet. And I have to see these Rangers every day. And you just feel, man, I just wish I could get this one more fight, this one more jump. But it's a lifestyle. The Ranger Battalion is a lifestyle, the regiment.
Yeah, and I think I hear the same thing from like any guy who comes on who's a SEAL, who's a Ranger. There are some guys who I think turn the next chapter and do something entirely different. Like, I don't know if you know Chris Dykos we had on, who's, you know, an educator now, and it seems like he even said most people who Google him or meet him, they have no idea that he's an Army Ranger or was an Army Ranger. And yeah, I think there's kind of, you know, there's the guys who are constantly reliving it or you know, for the better, doing speeches on it, writing books, that type of thing. And then there's the guys who say, I'm turning a whole new chapter of my life. And I
Right.
guess it's just a difference in approach for how some guys want to live their life.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Uh, like I said, when I left, when I retired from the Army, I went through an adjustment. I say the first 6 months was a rough, but I prepared myself mentally, you know, because I came in when I was 18 years old, right? And so you grew up, became a man in the military, and all of a sudden you're at this point in your life. Well, it's about to end, and
How
so
long
you
were
had to
you when
start.
how old were you when you left?
I was see, I was in my late 30s because I
Okay. I
came
mean,
in
so that's
on
a long
18.
career. So it's a
Yeah, 26
20-year
years.
career.
26 years.
26. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so the first 6 months was an adjustment. You know, you have your highs and lows. Um, but after that, you have to keep yourself busy. You have to get back to work. You have to do something. A lot of, you know, some of my friends that gain weight, they just they get depressed and they go through the stages. But you have to start setting goals. You have to start setting goals and plans for the future because you can't dwell on the past. Because one thing about the past, you can't change it.
Yeah.
And so I look on my past as some great times, but you know, I look to the future to make things happen. And that's what you have to do.
Yeah. And I could
Reinvent
tell
yourself.
you were definitely not a guy who stopped working out or any of that.
And you know, I tell people working out is the fountain of youth. It's a fountain of youth. You got to work out. I work out every day. I don't miss a day working out. I just don't.
It's awesome, man. Well, like I said, I mean, I could attest to that. You probably have seen the photo, you guys listening, of me with Max. And yeah, you could tell at his age to be in that type of shape at SHOT Show last year. But yeah, let's get into the last SHOT Show 2023, because I kind of missed it due to work stuff. And you just got back from there about a week ago. I'm wondering how it was. I mean, a lot of times you go and there are things that you've seen every year. As someone like yourself who's gone every year, I've been there probably a good 5 times at this point. What was new? What was different? Was it a bigger turnout than last year for people in the industry who didn't get to check it out?
Well, it was about, it was a little bit bigger than last year. You know, if you've been to SHOT Show prior, it used to be packed. It used to be so packed you can barely move. You really
True.
couldn't enjoy the exhibits. You stopped every 5 minutes, but this is more manageable. And I really enjoyed this SHOT Show. Had opportunity to see a lot more of the exhibits. They had a lot of new stuff out. You know, a lot of, especially in the technology field, drones, and one of the things that I like was the casings that protects your phone from, you know, being picked up from satellites and things like that.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think of the company called Slant. They have a lot of product out, you know, to hide your signature from your phones. But it was really good. Especially, I went to the range day. Range day had opportunity to fire a lot of the weapons. It was no long lines, and it wasn't a lot of, you know, a lot of new things out, a lot of the same old stuff. But I had a great time. I had a great time.
Yeah, I mean, and also our friends at the Photonus booth were there. They're really doing big things for night vision and really changing the game in that aspect. We love working with those guys. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot, and there's also some people who just didn't show up this year. I think as things get more online, but I hope to be back next year. I'm not someone who likes everything being like this, everything through a computer. I do like to get out and interact and meet some of the people that I get to talk to.
Yeah, who let the dogs out? You got to get out there.
Yeah, I
But
agree, man. How
you
was
would
the
enjoy
weather
it
in
this
Vegas?
year. Oh, it was
Yeah,
cold, around 30, 31 degrees. It got to the low 30s. Day one on the range, Monday, it was, it got down to around the mid to low 30s. And then it started raining towards the end of the day and as the temperature dropped. But, being a ranger that I am, I just embrace this up. I love it. Rain, shine, sleet, or
yeah.
snow, we're going to be out there shooting.
Yeah, I mean, being here in between New York and Connecticut, I really have the studio here in Connecticut, and then I'm in New York. You kind of hope when you go to Vegas, it's going to be great weather. That doesn't sound any better than here. So I guess I didn't miss out on that aspect.
Yeah, the
But yeah,
weather sucked.
So I didn't miss anything exciting in terms of that. I like to like do some Vegas type stuff though while I'm there. I did get to go see Chris Angel last year. That was cool. So I always try to like enjoy some of that Vegas life a little bit as I'm there.
Yeah, what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas, baby.
I don't know if you lived that life while you were there. You're like a pretty well-behaved guy.
Yeah, well, back in the day when Mad Max was at his peak, I was something. But I repented of my heathen ways, and so I go to Vegas just to have a good time in a good way.
Well, I wouldn't mind actually asking you about that. I mean, I do want to get into some deployment stuff, but now that you mention it, it's an interesting thing because meeting you at SHOT Show, and I want to make it clear, you're not a guy who comes across as preachy or anything like that. But as we're just casually talking, you are a guy who will quote the Bible. You are a Christian. You're into all that. That's a big part of your life. And like when we had Chief Beck on the show, they were talking about how the military, and they're talking about the SEALs, but always has that Bible thumper and always has that guy who's out of control. And it's like a mix of all these different personalities. So for you, did that come about after your time as an Army Ranger, or were you a big Bible believing Christian as you were deployed?
Well, it came after I retired out of the service. That I had I met a man named Jesus on the way to Damascus back in October 26, 1997, which profoundly changed my life forever. And as I grow in my Christianity, I became a minister, and I was a children's church minister for 3 years, in charge of a children's church. Probably one of the hardest jobs, short of being a range instructor, was that of a children's church minister. And the reason I tell people that is that I had to be humbled. When I told my pastor, I felt I was called to preach. And he said, I got just a job for you. I said, what's that, sir? He said, I'm going to put you in charge of the children's church. I said, oh, no, not me. I mean, I'm a combat soldier, range instructor, and, all this, multiple deployments. And that's not my call. He said, I think it's going to be a good call for you. I said, well, can I think about it? He said, yeah. So I went home and thought about it. I prayed and I fasted because I wanted to hear, was this my calling? And so, the Spirit of the Lord took me to David, King David, how the prophets told to find the next king. And so he went to David's father and he went down the line and, this Lord, this one, no, 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 no. Well, then he asked David's father, well, you have any other? He said, well, I got this one out there in the backwoods. He's ruddy. He's out there with the sheep, and said, bring him here. And so he said, that's going to be the next king. And so I said, wow. And so here he was, then the Lord said, how can you be in charge of greater things if you can't take care of the little things? And so that convicted me. And so I had to be humbled and to take these children and mold them, and train them up. The Bible said, train up a child they should go to depart from their ways. And so after 3 years, I said, I'm finished with it. I didn't see no reward in it. But I didn't see the reward till years later. 15 years later, I'm walking down the street and all of a sudden, I remember I walked into this auto parts store, and this kid was mean mugging me. He kept looking at me. And I'm saying, excuse me, you know me from somewhere? He said, are you Minister Mullen? I said, yeah. He said, I remember you. I said, yeah, you're my children's church pastor. He said, you know that stuff you taught us? I teach it to my kids. I said, you
Wow.
remember that stuff? He said, yes. So this happened multiple times. And so that was my reward right there. And so, when I meet my fellow Ranger brothers, I don't, hit them over the head with the Bible. Um, I let my actions speak. I don't want them to change because of me. But so I share the gospel when there's an opportunity. I share the gospel. So they ask me, I tell them my testimony, and all I gotta say, this is for real. This is for real. And I remember one of the most exciting things when the Lord came in my life. I was excited. I said, man, everybody need to hear this. Everybody, and you'd be so excited as a young saint. You try and share this gospel, and people look at you like, what? And you get frustrated, and you said, well, why don't you listen? I said, well, remember, you was like that. Did you? I said, yeah, you got a point. You got a point. And so the Bible said wisdom wins souls. So that's how I try and equate it.
Yeah, and like I said, just speaking with you, I didn't get the feeling you were trying to preach to me or change my view on anything. We were just having a good discussion about things going on in the military, things going
Yeah,
on in
yeah.
culture, things that you see going on in the military that you're not happy with, really, that you don't think or like when you became a Ranger. And yeah, I think the Bible verses just came about as we were discussing these things, and I could tell that it's all things that you're passionate about.
Yeah, you have to be passionate. You have to be passionate. You get this boldness when you have the Spirit of the Lord. You have this boldness about you. You want to share this gospel that saved. But again, I don't go around pushing my faith on people. They ask me,
Sure.
I find an opportunity, and I try and use wisdom when I approach that, and I try and let my actions and my ways speak for itself.
Yeah, it's well said. Well, before we were doing this interview and we were preparing some things that we could get into, you were telling me you didn't really get a chance to get in depth with your time at the DMZ, the
Yeah,
demilitarized zone, North Korea, South Korea, the border in between. And I know people who have been there as investigative journalists like Jack Murphy after his time as a Ranger. And to me, it's got to be incredible how you have this one country or this one piece of land separated by the DMZ of this authoritarian dictatorship, and then South Korea, which is more like a westernized democracy, more similar to what we live in. I'm sure it has to be a complete culture shock because we really don't know what comes out of there. There's very little media. I mean, the only media I've ever watched out of North Korea, and I don't know if you've ever seen it, was the documentary that Dennis Rodman was a part of, The Big Bang in
right.
Pyongyang, from when he went over there. But for the most part, we just hear about it. And I think for you to actually be there and see it, you must have some amazing stories.
Oh, absolutely. My first duty station in the Army was Korea. I was assigned there as a private, and I was assigned to the Second Infantry Division, and at that time was in a armor in an armor battalion, like First and Second Armor, First Brigade, the Iron Brigade. And because I was 11 Charlie mortars, and so they had mortars that were attached to the armor unit, to the armor. They fired the loom for their when they did their tank gunnery and also support them on their night fires. But when I got there, the ironic thing, when I got to Korea, I got there January 6th, 1977. And at that time, and back in 76, the summer of 76, you had the Operation Paul Bunyan up there on the DMZ in Panmunjom. That is where you had two officers that were killed. They were up there. They had a crew. They were trimming the trees where they could get a good view at the bridge of no return. And so the North Koreans came. They were assisting them. No, cut here, cut that. And all of a sudden, some more vehicles pulled up. And so these North Koreans jumped out and they started beating the hell out of these guys and pulled out the axes. And they killed, I think 2 officers got killed. One was called
Wow.
Bonifest. And so we almost went to war. It went a full-time alert. Whole Second Division was deployed. We almost went to war at that time. And so I was in basic training hearing about, hey, they're about to go to war in Korea. And they went up there, they cut the tree down, dared North Korea to do something. So they were at a heightened state almost 6 months. Almost 6 months. So I get there in January. And so when I got there in January, Camp Casey, second ID was changed very little from the 1950s. You still had the Quonset huts. It was very cold. Temperatures got around the 32 below zero wind chill factor. And so when I got there, the unit do a lot of their training during the wintertime because as a heavy division at the time, you had the first brigade it was all armor, all mechanized. And so they did a lot of the training during the wintertime because the rice paddies were frozen up and the vehicles could maneuver. And so at that time, they maneuvered all over the peninsula of Korea during the wintertime. We'll go as far as Choani. We'd train up there in the Western Corridor, right from within artillery range of the North Koreans. And the North Koreans would always send these balloons over with propaganda leaflets. The balloons come over, they drop the propaganda leaflets all over the second ID area. And so you had to turn them in, but I kept a lot of them. And it was a war footing. When you left Seoul at that time, going towards Camp Casey, you had a lot more military bases at that time, small camps. Camp Garryowen up there in the Western Corridor. You had Camp Greaves right at there on the DMZ, the Manchus. And so you had guard posts out there. You had guard post Collier, you had guard post Olet, you had the American sector, where the Americans, that was their responsibility as far as patrolling. And they would rotate the units. I believe it was every 3 months, the units would rotate. I believe it was 3 months. Every 3 months, they rotate up there and assume the DMZ mission. So they go to a tent city. They go into a tent city. You have 4 Papa 1 with artillery there. And they would fire a registration round, every hour. Then they had like these alerts. But it was the real McCoy. It was real. You got up there to DMZ, it's a whole new different world. Because you go through the checkpoints, and then you cross the Freedom Bridge, and that was the last connection. Then you're out there within the buffer zone. So my first tour, we did a lot of training around, a lot of training, and we had to worry about infiltrators. We had the North Korean infiltrators to come through, and the infiltrators would mostly come through during the summertime, where the foliage is up, and it was rumored said that they would send their commandos who graduated, they'd send their commandos to the American sector because the American sector was, not as aggressively patrolled as with the rocks. And we would send patrols out. We do day patrols, night ambushes, and you get issued the ammunition and you go out there and you conduct your patrols. And so my first tour, President Park Chung-hee was the president, and President Kim Il-sung was the president of North Korea. And so it was a real war footing feeling. We kept live ammunition on the vehicles. And you got to remember at that time, the Vietnam War just really winding down. So a lot of the vehicles, you had the mortar carriers, but we kept all live ammunition on the vehicles. And we would have division alerts once a month. They're supposed to be called no notice alerts, where the siren to go off, wherever you're at, you get back to your unit. You go down to the motor pool to get the vehicle, you start loading up, and you go to these battle positions. You go to these battle positions, wait till alert was over, but they took it for real. They were serious about the alerts. And so you had that feeling of that war footing mentality that the North Koreans can come through anytime, because all of second ID and part of Seoul was within artillery range. And they had the element of surprise because most of their forces would move forward to the DMZ. But it was crazy. So that was my first tour. And I remember, you got to remember, a lot of the equipment that we had was the stuff they used during the Korean War, especially the cold weather gear. It was what we used during the Korean War. And we didn't have no heaters in the vehicles. And we had the regular Jeeps, and you're in the gun Jeep, you're right out there with no top on. And I remember as a young private, you get all this high-speed cold weather training, you had to suck it up. And I remember one night, we did all our movements at night, and we would get these weather warnings, and they say, okay, make sure all exposed skin is covered, wind chill factor 33 degrees below zero. And we had the old M1950 sleeping bags. So when we pull up into a position, we'll get into a position around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning. You put up a gigantic GP median tent, put your cots out, and you just had to just suck it up. And I tell you, it sucked,
I'm
and
sure. Hey, hope you guys are enjoying this interview with Howard Mad Max Mullen. Last on with us for episode 100. So if you don't get enough Mad Max Mullen from this episode, you could check that one out if you go back in the archives and listen to episode 100. Great guy. Yeah, so before we continue, we have a lot more to go. I want to talk about Photonis Defense. Now you can have the superpower to see in the dark with the Viper Binocular Night Vision System by Photonis Defense, which is the global leader in night vision solutions, providing more high-quality night vision capabilities than anyone. Military, law enforcement, and public safety end users utilize Photonis Defense solutions to give them the edge at night in tactical situations and rescue operations. Hunters, shooters, boaters, and enthusiasts can rely on the Photonis Defense Viper Binocular to become masters of darkness. The new Viper Binocular system carries the same features and benefits as the Photonis Defense Viper Monocular, with a ruggedized body, and harnesses the power of the Echo intensifier tubes, giving you sharper images, reduced halo, and industry-leading ultra-fast auto-gating across the range of dynamic operating conditions. If you're in the industry and you were at SHOT Show, I'm hearing from a lot of people, they're the coolest booth there. They had guys like Dale Sizemore there. They had a whiskey event. I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but Photonis knows how to do it. So visit photonisdefense.com for more information. PHOTONIS defense.com, or just look for Photonis Defense product options from your night vision dealer. And if you want to go back in the archives, we did a whole night vision show with Phil Otto, and you can learn all about why it's worth paying that premium for great night vision. Also, this show is sponsored by Fort Scott Munitions. Fort Scott, every show they do for us, you guys know by now, manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC spun ammunition. It's designed to tumble upon impact. TUI, their trademark. It's wild. If you ever go to Fort Scott, Kansas, or you're ever in the area, as I've said before, they are the big fish in that small pond there. You walk into like a Walmart, you see Fort Scott hats and shirts everywhere. They're just loved in the community because they're great. They're not just great products, but a great family and great like customer service when you go into their store. So if you're ever in the area, it's not like an area you would pass through because you got to take a bit of a drive from the Kansas City airport to get there. But if you ever want to take that drive, because I have, you got to stop by the Fort Scott store and you got to buy some ammo from them. This ammunition was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. Once again, leaves devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. And it not only outperforms competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly has become apparent that it will be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammo being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with each pull of that trigger. And actually, now that I'm in high resolution for these parts, you could take a look at how cool are these tins. They still have the tins available on the website. These are just badass, man. Love it. Love it. So check it out. You could go to the dealer locator if you're going to go to a store by you, or go to fsm.com and order online. Get a tin like that. You'll get 15% off when you use the promo code BATTLELINE. Only available to listeners of the Battle Line podcast. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Chris Peranto, Battle Line Tactical, and the Battle Line podcast. When you support our sponsors, you're supporting us, and you're also going to get something that you're going to love, especially if you're a hunter, shooter, going to the range. So, yeah, whether you support Ned or Fort Scott Munitions or Photonis, Beard Vet, all of it helps us out. But check out Fort Scott Munitions once again. Use the promo code BATTLELINE. It's as simple as this, fsm.com. Now, let's get back to Howard, Mad Max Mullen, Army Ranger Hall of Famer. Let's go.
But on the second tour, my second tour in Korea, the President Chunda won. But I can see the progression of Korea. So my second tour was from 81. From 81 to 83, I believe it was my second tour. And so on my second tour, the second infantry division was given the mission of starting up designated riflemen, which was like small snipers. And so I was designated because I was Ranger qualified to be in charge of our little sniper section for our battalion. And so Special Forces Youngsong with the detachment, they're part of first group. They came up to second ID, and so they were training the second ID soldiers on on marksmanship for as designated marksmen. So we had the M14, we had the M14, M21 sniper system with arch scope, which is supposed to be the latest, greatest thing at the time. And we went out there and we trained. And one thing I finally remember, a guy named Sergeant First Class Melvin McIntyre. He was one of our instructors. And if you ever read SOG book by John Plaster, you see the mention Sergeant First Class Melvin McIntyre. He has since passed away, but he was one of the instructors. And to learn from a SOG veteran, he would get there, we'd sit down and talk, and he'd tell us how to break contact, how to break contact, immediate action drill, battle drills, and stuff like that. So we were learning from a SOG veteran. And so then after that, we were attached, my sniper section, we were attached to the 1st 17th Buffalo. So we went up there for the DMZ tour. And so I had my two sections. I had a section that was deployed to Camp Collier and Camp Olet. Now these were like fobs, bunkers, just like in the old match, you got the bunkers, overhead bunkers, and you had the guard towers. And the bunkers were manned. You had the claymores placed out. You had to break the dirt every morning, make sure no infiltrators come through, make sure nobody sneak down and try to turn the claymores away. But every day, I stayed up there on that DMC for the whole 3 months and only came down probably around 3 times just to, get a break. But I wanted to stay up there. And I would rotate shifts. We had a day shift and a night shift. They had a cook, it was a designated for us, and you can eat all day, all night if you weren't sleeping. And we would go up into the tower, and we had an infrared system which detect the heat. And you had these gigantic ship-to-shore binos, and I stared into North Korea every day. Yeah, propaganda village, and you can see the North Koreans. It looked like a modern village, but nobody lives there. And so every morning you would see the villagers. You see all of a sudden you see them appear, moving around in the village. Then you start to see them coming out to the rice paddies. You see the North Korean guards. They're walking along the fence line, and you see them working the fields. You see them working. And then as it gets twilight, you start seeing them kind of like moseying around. They started going back towards the village. You see them moving in the village. And all of a sudden, at one time, the lights would come on. And then you see like somebody moving, like a TV's playing, you see like somebody's moving, but nobody's there. The village is completely empty. But on my second tour, it was a guy named PFC Danny White. He was attached to the 1st or 31st Bearcat. And he went AWOL across the fence. A lot of people don't remember that, but his name was PFC Danny White. And the division went on a full alert. And what happened, he was up there at Garpost Olet because it was closer to the fence, probably with no more than 100 yards to the fence. You can see a North Korean bunker. And he just, one night he was in his bunker position, got out, walked across to North Korea, and they captured him.
Wow.
And so they sent patrols out with the 100% alert, and they thought he was, kidnapped, but he went across that fence, la-di-da-di. So on a week later, these propaganda leaflets are dropping around. Shows him up there in Pyongyang with a big bouquet of flowers. They have pictures of his equipment all laid out. And so, coming to North Korea, everything's great and so forth. But they kept him alive for around 7 or 8 years, and they got everything out of him. They found his body floating in the Jim River, and he was sent back to St. Louis. Yeah, so it was a real McCoy in Korea. But I remember we would set up night ambush positions, and it's spooky as hell because especially with no light, we set up night ambush positions, waiting for North Korean infiltrators to come through. We never made contact. But it was a real McCoy. They no longer had the DMZ mission. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine. I think there's a little bit of a delay because the connection issues. So that's why we're stepping on each other a little bit. But what I was gonna say is you mentioned the leaflets, showing him, and then earlier on when you were describing the story, I didn't want to interrupt you, but you were mentioning them dropping leaflets as well, and you said you took some back. And it's interesting to hear about that because I feel like leaflets at the time, it's like there was no Twitter, there was no memes. Like this is their Twitter is just putting propaganda leaflets out there. So you said you took some back. Do you still have them? And like, do you know what it says on them?
I still have them. I had a Korean friend translate them, but I still have the. I wish I would have brought them up here and show you, but I still have the leaflets. We pulled to turn them into the S2, but I pocket them things because I knew they were good collector's item.
What type of stuff does it say though? Like did your friend say it translates to?
Well, a lot of the propaganda leaflets of South Korean soldiers that defected, captains and majors, a couple of NCOs. And so what happened, a lot of those soldiers that defected were in some type of trouble. So to cross the fence, all of a sudden again, they had the big old bouquet of flowers and TV and show them life is great in North Korea. And they'll use them for the propaganda purpose. So you never hear from them again. And most of them is telling me, the ones for the Americans say American imperialist pigs, come to North Korea, life is good, Kim Il-sung, we're going to get victory, typical propaganda that you would hear, even it changed very little from the Korean War.
What do you think needs to be done with that region of the world now as someone who's actually been there? I mean, it's interesting because we had years where there was no contact whatsoever. President Trump actually met with Kim Jong-un. People had mixed feelings about him being there and mixed feelings about him saying, and this is a direct quote saying we fell in love. I remember him talking about Kim Jong-un. And I don't know if any progress has been made in the region. I don't think they're necessarily a threat to us, but they're a threat to our allies like Japan, like South Korea. What do you think needs to be done? I mean, because there's always a differentiation in the philosophies of people that I hear from of we need to be the world police on some level. We need to do something about these hostile nations. And then you have the people that are saying we're too invested all over the globe. Our troops are spread too thin. We're in Ukraine, we're still in Afghanistan. So I'm just wondering, do you think something needs to be done? And if so, what?
South Koreans don't need us. We're over there to keep the South Koreans from going north. The South Koreans are a well capable army. They're real capable. And for President Trump across the DMZ, I think it was a great thing. Honestly, it was a great thing. Because you got the industrial war, the industrial military complex. They want to go to war. North Korea is no threat. They're no threat whatsoever. But back in the '60s, they were a threat. I don't know if you ever heard of the Blue House raid?
No, I'd have to look it up, but get into it.
Yeah. When Kim Il-sung, when he was still alive, back in 1968, just after the USS, back in 1968, they sent a 33-man North Korean commando squad down from North Korea to assassinate the president of South Korea, Syngman Rhee. That was his mission, to go down there and assassinate the president. And so what happened, these guys trained for a whole year. They were specially selected. And they're especially selected because they wanted to use the Koreans whose families lived in the South, because the North Koreans and South Koreans is a different, even though they speak Hangul, Korean, there's a different dialect. Like you hear a Southern dialect and so the different dialect. So they handpicked these guys because of their dialect. And these guys trained, the training they did for that 1 year, this 33-man commando squad. If you ever take a look at pictures of the terrain in North Korea, it is insane. These guys would put on rucksacks and run up these hills. They would be buried with dead bodies. The training they went through is absolutely insane. These guys were, at that time, one of the most physical specimens physically that you ever seen. They were mentally tough. They had no fear whatsoever. And they infiltrated in the wintertime through the American sector. and they hit the high ground, and they were moving. They were basically double timing. They had their uniforms on. They had rock uniforms on, insignia and so forth like that, over these black coveralls. And he infiltrated and he hit the high ground into the mountains. And these guys were hauling butt. They were hauling. But they stopped to rest, and they saw these South Korean woodcutters, and they got compromised. And so they captured these South Koreans, right, woodcutters. Same thing that happened in Operation Red Wing. With Latrell and those guys when they caught
Yeah,
the
sure.
shepherds.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
kill these guys or we let them go. These North Koreans are faced with the same thing. Should we kill them or let them go? What they decide to do, they decide to sit down and indoctrinate these two woodcutters, tell them about the greatness of North Korea. Then they let them go. And so what happened? They told these South Korean woodcutters, "Hey, don't tell nobody you saw us." Those South Koreans, they double time down there. They got with a rock checkpoint, said, "Hey, you got some bad guys, and something wicked is going down there to South Korea." And so the full division was alerted, and the rocks were alerted, and they hit the high grounds. But these guys are double timing that they're always one step ahead of them. Now they got to the skyline, the hills, and they saw the bright lights of South Korea. And a lot of them were thinking, "Wow, we've been lied to." So they changed it to the right uniforms, and they went down there, and so all of South Korea and Seoul was on a high alert. So they started marching in formation down the street with rock uniforms on, and they get through these checkpoints, right? Let them through. 100 meters shy of the Blue House, which is equivalent to our White House, 100 meters shy of their objective, this alert captain, South Korean captain, stopped them and asked them something in Korean. But it is jit and jive. And so that commando element, they panicked. They threw grenades, started lighting everybody up. They killed some people on the bus, and they scattered to the four winds. They started E&Eing back to North Korea. They hunted these guys down for almost a week. They corralled these guys up. A lot of them committed suicide. They put a grenade to their face and chest, and they blew themselves up. Someone hunted down and killed. Now, one made it all the way back across. He became a Korean general. He became a hero. One was captured. He didn't want to commit suicide. He was captured. They kept him for almost 6 months to a year, and they grilled him for everything he had as far as intel. They let him go. You're free to go. So here this man is. They killed his family in North Korea. Had all this equipment laid out. They used it for propaganda. So he became a minister. And I tried to contact him one time because I wanted to write a story on him.
Yeah, I mean, that would be an amazing story.
And so I was able to contact, right? And through one of my friends, she was Korean, and she spoke to him. I said, I can't remember his name, but he's a minister. I said, tell him, I don't want to talk about any of the ideology and stuff. I want to talk about that mindset that they had, the training that they went through to do this. And he simply said, I don't want to talk about it. They performed autopsies on these North Korean commandos. And one of the surgeons said, these guys look like miniature bodybuilders, zero blood fat. They're proportioned miniature bodybuilders. Now, I wrote a fictitious story based off true facts and stuff, what I know of the unit. And the person read it. A guy read it, he contacted. He said, hey, you wrote a story on the North Korean commandos. I said, yeah, I did. And he said, that was pretty damn good. He said, how'd you get information? I said, well, I just piecemealed it together, right? What I thought that they may do and stuff, James Brooks and all this other stuff. He said, well, you know what? I was the Division S2. And when the South Koreans hunted these guys down, they were not allowed to touch the bodies until we came and took pictures of them. He said, I got those pictures. I want to send them to you. So he sent me the pictures of these North Korean commandos that they killed. never before seen, never before seen. I have them right now.
Oh,
And
wow.
you see these guys, you say, what were they thinking? What was their mindset to do this? Now, people talk smack about the North Koreans. They had one of the largest special operations forces in the world. And these guys know no fear. You can go on Google, I mean, you can go on YouTube, you can see them doing their cheat demonstrations, board breaking, and people laugh at these guys. But these guys are the real McCoy. You know, they will, I wouldn't want to fight them. You know, I would respect their fight capability because again, they have the tactical advantage as far as invasion. They got all these tunnels, right? I remember up on the DMC, they blow these tunnels and then get thousands of soldiers through these tunnels. They got tunnels they haven't even found yet. And then they would have all these Soviet era biplanes that come and just parachute guys all over. And so they would have a tactical advantage and it would be absolute chaos the first 48 hours on ground in South Korea.
This audience is definitely wondering now, where could they find this piece that you wrote, this fictitious, based on real life experience piece that you said you wrote?
It's hard. You had to go to the Wayback Machine. I have the link and
Oh,
I will
okay.
send it to you, Ian. Right, and I will
You got to release it. This audience will want to see it.
Okay, I'll release it again, and I'll let you know when I release it. And but it's about their physical fitness and stuff, right? Their PT.
I think you
And
should put it up, man. I mean, you could self-publish on Amazon. Hey, if you need an audiobook reader, I'm your guy. I think you should put it up though. I think people would love to hear it because there's so little known about North Korea truly. And the only people who really know anything about North Korea are the people who have been there and done that, like yourself, because as you said, it's a propaganda state. They don't let anything out of there.
one thing about the North Koreans, they had some really bad famines and floods, right? It got to the point where, especially far northern part of North Korea, up there near the Chinese border, they would just shut off whole villages and just let them die off. Even cannibalism. The birth rate, the nutrition. You look at these kids. How old is this kid? Oh, he's 18 years old. Look like 10-year-old, 12-year-old because of the malnutrition. He doesn't give a crap about those people. They just don't. And,
what about South Korea? What's the culture like there?
Oh, South Korea is like a modern metropolis. You got K-pop, but everything started changing after 1988 Olympics. The transformation was unbelievable. I remember on my second tour, you leave Seoul, you go north towards Camp Casey with nothing but open rice paddy. My last tour, when I was there, this is way after the Olympics. I didn't even know I left Seoul till I saw a sign that said "Welcome to Weijambu." It built up insanely. They closed a lot of the concerns. They had the Rodriguez Range Complex, and so they can't train like we used to because everything's built up. So you had to train on the Rodriguez Range Complex, Twin Bridges was a Rock Army training complex. So you're limited. So I was so happy and blessed that I served that I did because we trained where we would fight. But now you just can't because it's so built up, insanely built up. We closed a lot of bases. We got the mega base down there at Camp Humphreys. When they built Camp Humphreys used to be known for its aviation, right? CH-47s. When they built that mega base at Camp Humphreys, they moved a whole village and they completely leveled a whole mountain to put that base there. It's insane. As far as like the South Korean, the ROK soldiers, they are the real McCoy. They're special operations forces. When in fact, when I was the Ranger instructor, we had a ROK captain come through. Captain Kim, I'll never forget him. He was ROK SF Halo instructor, ROK Special Forces scuba instructor. This guy was stacked. And so he came through Ranger School. And I remember they were doing a combat water survival test. And he kept flunking the last station where you had to put your equipment on, you jump in the water, you release it, and come to the top. But he kept coming to the top. So he was a two-time no-go. I'm observing, right? So I told him, so I said, pass him. Oh, hell no, Max. You can't pass him. He flunked 2 times. I said, dude, pass him. No, he didn't meet the standard. I said, look, Jeff, this man's a rock damn scuba instructor. He will swim circles around you and I without even blinking an eye. Put him back in. Well, Max is on you, so put him back in. And he didn't speak very good English, but this guy, as far as tactics go, he was something. So I would call down to the camp, check, hey, what about, hey, this got this cap, how's he doing? Man, that dude's like a damn Superman in the jungle. I mean, he's good. And so I remember Captain Kim, he graduated. And he came to my room, knocked on the door. I said, Ranger Kim, you know you're not supposed to be in the cadre barracks. He said, Sergeant Mullen, I want to give you something. He had his rock camouflage uniform on, he had his rock beret on, and he gave me this towel with all the rock special forces badges on it. He said, I want you to have this, and I want you to have this beret. So I gave him my Ranger t-shirt, I gave him a beret. He went on to become the rock chief of staff, 4-star.
That's so cool. That's amazing. That's a great story. Have you gone back to visit just as a civilian now, and just to maybe see how it's updated since all these decades?
Believe it or not, I have no desire to go back.
Okay.
Because I want to remember how it used to be. Because
Sure.
I looked at some of the old camps, right? Weeded over, it's just derelict, and just like years ago, this right here had over 60,000 combat troops here, ready to kick butt. Now it's just like, it's just a different vibe. It's just not the same.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. You know what I was going to ask you about? Like one last thing that I wanted to get into here was last episode we had on Frank Grippy, Command Sergeant Major Frank Grippy,
Frank,
who
yeah.
I think is, I think kind of from your era, right? I'm sure you guys have crossed paths. Yeah, he was excellent. And, you know, one of the things Chris asked, and he probably want to ask you about if he was here, and, you know, we'll do this third episode at some point when he's back. But he was saying to Command Sergeant Major Grippy how every generation of Army Ranger, you feel like the younger generation is softer and they're not as tough. And I know for you, you still go back to do speeches. You still go back to be a mentor to some of these younger Army Rangers and some of these younger recruits and that type of thing you were telling me about, because you are a public speaker and you do a lot of events for the U.S. military. Yeah, I was just wondering, what's your opinion and where do you see things going with this current crop of Army Rangers and this current group of guys? What are you seeing that's different? What do you like? What do you dislike?
As far as the Army Rangers, these guys are like a bunch of Captain Americas jacked up on super soldier serum. As far as physical, I mean, the training, the equipment, these guys are light years ahead of us. Back when I served, you know, a lot of emphasis on running, you know, running and a lot of running, a lot of, you know, small unit tactics and things like this. But these guys, they're you know, they're up there, they're tier 1 guys. You know, it's no comparison. But one thing I say about our era is I wouldn't change our era that I served in for nothing. You know, they may have all the high school, you know, high speed equipment and things, but I look back on our era is that the way we trained is we jumped a lot more. You know, they don't jump as much, but I remember back in the day, we jumped, every time we went to the field, we jumped in. We did a night mass tactical jump. And so it wasn't uncommon for somebody to serve in a battalion 3 or 4 years, have over 300-400 jumps. And I remember that, like, when young Rangers go from we call it RIP Ranger Indoctrination Program, they call it RAS-1, they would probably have around 15 to 20 jumps before they even report to the battalion, because they had to be proficient at jumping, because that was our main way of insertion, was through, you know, parachute insertion. And, you know, to be a pioneer on a lot of these things like airfield seizures and things like that, how our era set the standards for these young Rangers. But these guys, they're carving out a legacy of their own. I mean, these guys They're great. They're great.
That's good to hear, because I think sometimes, and people who listen back to old episodes of this show could see that Chris is, I think, salty like some of these other, Army Rangers of your generation sometimes. And Chris will often say it. I don't think I'm saying anything that he wouldn't say. He's like, "Oh, this generation's gotten soft," but it sounds like, because I know you feel the same maybe about conventional military, but special ops will always be special.
Yeah, they're always going to be special. Our special operations capability, there's not a nation in this country can defeat our special operations forces. But you can't depend on the special operations forces to take the bulk of the fight. Now, as far as our regular service, it's different. It's so different with the changing of the basis. Um, it's gotten woke. It's gotten political. I don't give a flip what they say. The Army's gotten political. It's woke. There's too much emphasis on, for instance, the grooming standards is almost zero. The standards. Back then we had pride in that uniforms. Here, you don't have to have pride. Oh, you can't wash your uniform. They're not, so look like they're just pulling stuff out of a duffel bag. It's no sense of pride. And some of the hair standards is like, man, how the hell you get away with that haircut, man? That's a damn fat haircut. And that's a fat haircut. It's just a different culture. The non-commissioned officer corps back then, they don't even do the shark attack anymore. They do some other stuff, 1,000 meters, something like. They even do a shark attack. And I was talking to some young soldiers. They said, "Hell, that's what we expected. We expect to get smoked by the drill sergeant. We expected to get smoked. They can't do that. The drill sergeant hands are tied. Oh, you want to talk to Johnny? You don't want to holler at Johnny. You want to talk to Johnny. You want to talk to Joe. Don't be so mean, be cruel. Let's sit down and talk. Let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Bump that. You better get your butt down and start pushing some Georgia mud." But, you can't do that now.
So I get from you, I feel like, as a whole, you feel like the Army has changed for the worse. But when it comes to special operations units, Army Rangers, Delta Force, and SEALs and all that, these guys are still the most lethal units out there.
Oh, they're the hammers. Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
It's not like I say, they can't, not our special operational forces.
Well, it's well said, man. Well, this has flown by. We've gone an hour here. A lot of great stories from you. I really do think you should publish that fiction. Is it a fiction novel, would you say, or just a fiction piece? Because I think people want to hear it.
It's a fiction piece based off real events.
Yes.
Again, because I was limited to the information that was available at that time. We didn't have, but it's pretty well. It was pretty well received, and I'm going to do that. Yeah, I'm going to repost it. Well,
I think it would show. Sorry, what were you saying?
In closing, I want to say this: like the North Korea, they still conduct infiltration, big time.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a member of the sub that beached, and these guys got out. A lot of them committed suicide in the sub, but they kept chasing this one guy. Man, they couldn't catch him. That guy, he was such good condition, but they're still conducting infiltrations to this day. So,
yeah, I'm sorry if I'm stepping on you here. Like I said, it's a little bit of a connection thing. But yeah, I think it would show a different side to you, because I think people know you from social media. They know you as the badass bodybuilding Army Ranger, and they don't know you as a writer. And I think it would be really cool to see. I would just like to see the piece. And yeah, as I said earlier, there's so little out of there. And I've never heard these stories. And I think very few people have heard these stories. People have read people who are into this type of podcast have heard so many GWAT stories. They've heard what goes on in Iraq, Afghanistan, even some of the stuff in South America that Chris has spoken about, and even guys who've been stationed in places like Germany. But there's not a lot of DMZ, North Korea, South Korea stories out there, and I think it would be valuable to hear.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna take you up on that. I'm gonna do it.
That'd be
also,
great.
another thing too is this is in closing.
Yeah.
Was my training in Panama, JLTC. I did 6 GLT deployments, 6, right? And I tell people one of the best schools the Army ever had as far as jungle operations was Fort Sherman, Panama, Jungle Operations Training Center. They got in Hawaii, that ain't jungle. It's tropical forest. Ain't no real jungle.
Well, next time that we have you on, we could talk Panama then, it sounds like.
Sound like a plan.
That would be cool. So for everybody listening, it's at Max_Mullen with 2 N's at the end, Max_MULLENN. Right? I have that correct?
That's right, brother.
Yeah. On Instagram. Anything else that you're promoting? I know you do a lot of work with special operations, military charities, and I know you're on the public speaking circuit as well.
Well, I'm also a member on the Silent Warrior Foundation, and we have a really big event coming up. You go to our webpage, our website, and also on Facebook, Silent Warrior Foundation, and we have some really big events coming up. We did the 27 Minutes of Asante, the documentary. That should be wrapping up this year real soon. They're just doing final touches on it. Really good documentary about the Asante raid. We filmed it out there at the Dillon Range, but it's going to be really, really good because we had the actual Asante raiders there who were our advisors who were making that film.
Yeah, I'm looking at the website now. So what I'm seeing is silentwarriorfoundation.com. So you could visit that online, silentwarriorfoundation.com. Looks like they're also on Instagram and Twitter. I'll see if they're active on there before I give that out. Twitter, not so much. And then Instagram, or do they post stuff? I can't really see here.
We're active on Instagram.
So if they do, it's just at Silent Warrior Foundation is what I'm seeing on Instagram. Yeah, that's what I see here. Cool. All right. Well, check them out. Always an honor and a pleasure speaking with you. I'm sure I'll see you next year at SHOT Show, but I'm sure we'll cross paths at another time as well. And like I said, it truly was great meeting you and kind of talking in person and having these discussions, because I think you're a wealth of knowledge. And like I said, you're the real deal. Sometimes you meet people in person, they're not the same. If you meet Max, he will sit down and shoot the shit with you and give it to you straight.
As they say, I'm just trying to keep it real.
That's all for this episode of the Battle Line Podcast, but we'll be back on Monday with more American Straight Talk. Until then, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Battle Line Podcast and on Twitter at Battle Line Pod. To sign up for future Battle Line tactical courses, go to www.christantoperanto.net. Believe in yourself, face all challenges head on, and as always, never quit.